own responsive web page, and it can be on any topic that interests you. As a starting point, I highly recommend basically copying the home.html file that's inside your Zen folder and naming it My Responsive Web Page, or My Responsive Page. That this file will be directly in your Lesson 11 folder. Then I would take the Zen CSS, print CSS, and the screen CSS, copy both of those, put those into the Lesson 11 CSS folder, and name them My Print CSS and My Screen CSS. Okay, so I would use those for a starting point. And then you're going to go through and customize My Responsive Page. Make sure you've included the Viewport meta tag. You also need the SEO meta tags for your keywords and your descriptions. You should have at least 2 images, the alternate text, and hopefully the image name itself will reflect the content of the page. All your images should have responsive sizing. You want to have links to those external CSS files for print and screen so that it'll apply them. And you want to set up grid view. So you're going to have those column classes in different elements within your page. You need to have at least one H1 tag, and whatever text you have in there hopefully is reflective of the content in your page. You want at least 3 links, and these links do not need to be to your pages. They can be to anything. Okay, whatever the topic of your page is, you can link to it. And then you need at least 1 paragraph, and that paragraph should go into a section element or a div element. You also need an aside element, and you can actually put graphics in the aside element if that's how you want to set it up. You can also put text in there. The title for the page should be in the header section, and you also need a footer section that includes the copyright. So if you use the home page that's in the Zen folder as kind of a template for this, a lot of this is set up and you just have to customize it. Okay. This example here, it could also be used for a template. And what I did was, I was looking for inspiration, so I decided to do one on what inspires you. Okay, so this is kind of how I set this up. And you can see I've got my links over here, I've got my aside, and then I've got the section in the middle with the text that's showing. Okay, and these are all my images. But if I right click, view the page source, you can kind of see how I've set this up. Let's see if I can zoom in here. So I did use the viewport. I do have the links to my print and my screen. And then I've got the header, and that's where I actually put H1, my H1. And my whole topic is inspiration. So I do have the word inspires right in there. And I pretty much modeled this after the home.html that's inside Zen. So I do have it set up for class equal to row. And remember, the row class, anything that's below that is set up as a table. Okay? And then I've got the desktop column and the tablet column. Okay? And so I've got the whole thing set up for desktop or tablet. I did use my aside for images. Okay? And then in my footer, I actually included an image along with the copyright. Okay, so that's pretty much my HTML with all of the required elements in there. Then we get into the screen CSS. So you want to make sure you're using box sizing set to border box. You want to set up the grid view with the breakpoint for the tablets and the desktops. You need at least 3 columns in your page. Your H1 tag should be styled to include a font color, text shadow, background color, and a box shadow. All the link states should be styled. You can select whatever colors and effects you want. Mobile and tablet pages should have background colors applied. The desktop, you are going to want a background image. And you want that image sized using responsive web CSS. This is kind of a key point here. Make sure that the CSS you're using is necessary. Quite often, if you're trying to get a page to display right, you know, you throw in a bunch of CSS and the CSS doesn't work. Well, if it doesn't do what you're intending, take it out and don't clutter your CSS with a bunch of stuff that doesn't work. So here's my screen CSS. You can see at the top, I've got a little comment here about different colors that I might want to use in here. This is just a comment, okay? And then I get into my actual CSS. And this should look pretty familiar because this is basically what we used for Zen. I mean, there's not really anything different in here. So if you want to see the responsiveness of the page, if I read, oops, where did it go? I'm going to resize this. It gets to a certain point and then it's no longer displaying side by side. So we get into more of a vertical display. And that would be what a mobile phone would see. Okay, so this would be more tablet. And then we get small enough, it gets to mobile. Now, one interesting thing that I did with the text is I actually used the Viewport responsive text in this just to play with it and see how it worked. And it actually works pretty well. I mean, if you watch this, you can see that it actually sizes really nicely. So if we take a look here, that text ends in VW. Okay, so here I used Vmax. So this is a 2 Vmax, so the maximum size that I wanted is like 2 times the normal. I didn't want, if you use just VW, sometimes on a very wide desktop screen, the text gets really big. So I just did the 2 Vmax on that, which is a Viewport setting. And that was basically on the links is where I put that. Okay. Here I used 1.5 EM, that was in my header. For my H1, I used 3 Vmax. H2, I used 2 Vmax. Okay, so you can kind of see how I used those settings. And then of course my print, which we're going to talk about in a minute, is very similar to what we did in Zen. So I've got a default with all sorts of, I would call it resetting characteristics, where I kind of getting rid of all the formatting. The aside and image I set to none. I got rid of the border for my navigation, set the margin to 0, put in an underline. So this is basically all of the same stuff that we saw over in the Zen. And actually, I need to delete that because that I'm not even using. Same with details. So anything that's additional, extra like this, make sure you remove. Okay, because unless you have a detail and summary section, you don't need it in your print. So for the print, all images are hidden, the aside is hidden, all text is black, background color is white, borders, text shadows, box shadows, etc. are removed. And basically you can just set them all to none. Margins, padding, etc. are set to 0. Widths should be 100%. Links can display underlined, but all your coloring should be removed. And everything should be displayed as a block. And most of these changes can be specified using default, that default setting. Okay, so that's pretty much the assignment. And then once you are done with that, what you're going to do is link the assignments in. And so this is basically what lesson 11 would look like in the textbook section. And then for the supplemental, this is how it would look. And I will be able to access your CSS by viewing your source code, just like I did here. Because I can click on the links and see them that way. Okay, so that is the assignment. If you are looking for any kind of inspiration or ideas, send me a message because I am full of ideas. So I'm happy to help you come up with something. Okay, and try to have fun with this. I left it fairly open-ended, so you could have fun and do something that interests you.